Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is New Big Budget Bill Has Surprises for Everyone. Well, it's finally happened. The budget bill that Donald Trump's been talking about, promoting, thumping his chest about, actually did occur. It was a close, very close votes in the Senate and the House of Representatives, but nevertheless, it passed. And Donald Trump on the 4th of July signed it into law. What does it have? What are the provisions of this big, I don't even call it beautiful. I can't do that. It's not within my ability to call it beautiful. But what does this new big budget bill have? Well, it's a continuation of the 2017 IRS tax cuts that certainly gave corporations a huge advantage. And there were individual tax cuts back then. Added about $4 trillion to the deficit back then. But that will now become permanent and is as a permanent tax law in place. Secondly, as promoted, and maybe not correctly so, was the removal of tax on tips and on overtime. Another provision was actually a deduction for seniors that are over 65 years old. We'll get into that in a bit. A child credit tax, and certainly work requirements on Medicaid recipients. So to talk about all of that and more, I have with me my two esteemed guests, special guests, David Larson, professor of law at Mitchell-Hamlin, and Chuck Crumpton, attorney and mediator extraordinaire in the city of Honolulu. And of course, as always, Jay Fidel, my co-host and CEO of ThinkTech Hawaii. Good morning, gentlemen. Jay, to you first. You know, what we heard about the bill before it was passed versus what are the details of the bill now that it has passed, in many ways are two different things. And you and I talked about this not long ago, particularly the details of the goodies in the bill. We kind of know what's in it for those recipients that are going to be on Medicaid and some Medicare. We know that. But some of the goodies that were dangled out for people to like, for example, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and the promotion of Social Security taxes being eliminated. Well, that's not true. What's your take on this bill?
He lied about what it said. Are we surprised? He gaslighted the country. And I just love the idea that he signed it on July 4th. He made July 4th his deadline, as if there was something patriotic about the bill. It's the way he wraps himself in the flag and kisses the flag to try to show us that it's all about patriotism. It's not about patriotism. It's about the hijack of patriotism. Ergo, the deadline. Ergo, signing it on July 4th. Ergo, wrapping himself in the flag. It's a gaslight. He lied. And just remarkable that he got this thing through, even when there was so much opposition to it. It's a sad state for the GOP. They'll never live it down. And I feel that if there was a fair election for the midterms, everyone would vote against him because by that time they will realize. Now, I agree with your point that they won't. So a lot of people won't realize because some of the provisions don't come into effect for 2 years, so they won't get the message. But those who get the message will vote against him. And then the question is whether there really will be elections. We can talk about that. But I want to read you a thing I got from Jennifer Rubin this morning, which I thought was really a great capsulization and follows your introduction. Quote, "The worst piece of legislation since the Slave Fugitive Act passed 175 years ago. It rips a gash in the social safety net, delivers the largest transfer of wealth to the rich in memory, and supercharges a violent, reckless, and cruel deportation machine, one which approves of spending tens of billions of dollars to expand the unconstitutional kidnapping, trafficking, and confinement of people who have committed to no crime. It strangulates our soft power in the world, hollowing out foreign aid, demolishing the State Department, guts investment in science and green energy, and consigns millions, many of those millions, to children, to a life bereft of decent nutrition and medical care. It piles unsustainable, stupefying debt on future generations. In total, the American people will have less access to health care, nutrition, education, and economic opportunity. This MAGA assault on working and middle class Americans will reverberate for years, if not decades. So anyway, that's Jennifer Rubin, and I really appreciated that. Bottom line is the bill makes no sense. Why? And I hope we can discuss this today. Why would you do such destructive things? This is a destruction of the country, just like knocking off the federal government was a destruction, just like alienating our allies over imaginary tariff issues. Why? And it all leads to the conclusion that we're living in a world of madness.
Well, I would never take the MAGA side or the Trump side of defending this, but to answer your question, don't corporations love this bill because it keeps their corporate rates at the existing level? Don't those who benefited from the first tax revision back in his first term enjoy the advantageous tax rates for given their income? Just to name those two things alone, doesn't this also satisfy the social trope that we have welfare kings and queens that are getting benefits from the federal government and they're not willing to work? And I just heard on today's news, I can't remember the commentator's name, but he said there's 4 million people that don't want to work and they shouldn't receive Medicaid benefits. I mean, doesn't this check box and mark all the check boxes for both the social tropes and the financial advantages?
2 points on that, Tim. First of all, on the positive points, he lied and he caused his acolytes to lie. There are some things that he threw away as bribes, to wit, the bribe he gave to Murkowski about Alaska to get her vote. And there are a lot of other lies which he used to get support. That's the one point. The other point is, if you really felt that way, if the GOP really felt that way, why go this far? They could have moderated these provisions. They could have given some wealth to the wealthy, but they didn't do that. It's the greatest, extremism of giving the wealth to the wealthy. And for that reason, you can't believe in its sincerity. This is not moderated policy. And I want to add one more thing. This is straight from him and the Project 2025 guys. It is not something that was discussed in Congress. It was strong-armed in Congress. It was strong-armed by the GOP to the GOP. It was based on threats and midnight calls, and not on open discussion in congressional hearings. And in that regard, it is identical to the procedure that Trump used to the Tax Reform Act to get the Tax Reform Act of 2017 passed. It's a new kind of approach. You never discuss it. You merely strong your loyal legislators to voting for it. But Congress, and especially the Senate, the greatest deliberative body in the world, isn't that what it is? The greatest deliberative body in the world did not deliberate. No hearings whatsoever.
That's a great point, Jay, and I want to follow up that. Chuck, given what Jay just said, now remember, our existing debt, national debt, I think is about $36.2 trillion. This proposed budget bill is going to add approximately $3.4 trillion on top of that existing national debt. To Jay's point, and do you agree that something of this monumental addition of national debt didn't receive hardly any time in the Senate as far as debate, nor the House? Or did I get that wrong? Maybe Jay and I are wrong. Where was the debate on this bill?
No, you're exactly right. There was neither debate nor have there been any guardrails on Trump and his so-called MAGA policies, 2025, Project 2025 policies from the beginning. And that's what this is all part of. It's essentially to decimate any possible opposition in or from government to unlimited power and control of wealth by Trump and those who he feels are allied with him. It's that simple.
It wasn't only that there were no deliberations, no hearings about this. There were all these agencies, including Trump agencies and nonprofits and think tanks, that told the government it was a bad bill and that it would have terrible effect on the country. And the officials that got up to respond to that invariably said, no, they're all wrong. This agency, this institution, this think tank, and dozens of them, they're all wrong. So to the extent they got advice from qualified experts, from people who knew the story, who could evaluate the bill and its effects, they rejected all of that uniformly, unanimously among the Trump administration.
Chuck, a big part, okay, if this is a $3.2 trillion add-on or $3.4 trillion add-on to our national debt, it seems to me that the biggest aspect of it is to maintain the tax cuts back in Trump's first term of 2017. It's hard to recognize or appreciate something that you've had for going on 8 years now. Yet, how do you think the public will perceive this budget bill if they're already receiving the benefit and they don't realize really what new provisions they have in this big budget bill, yet we add $3.4 trillion on to national debt? Is it a psychological issue that we're going to deal with that people already receive and they don't appreciate, or they forgot what they received?
It raises several points. One is that, just as Jay indicated, expert commentary, independent commentary, objective commentary on the impacts, the economic impacts, and on the socioeconomic impacts of those provisions of the bill have been suppressed intentionally and bypassed in the passage of this legislation. The second thing is, we know that the indirect effects are going to be far, far greater than that $3.4 trillion, out of which $1 trillion alone is Medicare cuts. That's a third of the increase. And it lands directly on the people who can't afford it. The highest proportion of people who are on Medicaid who are going to be impacted by this are people over 50 and people of color. That's exactly the population, the demographic that he's targeting, because he's not anticipating enough adverse effects of the impact on that portion of the electorate, even if there is an election. And Jay raises an important question. If he gets away with declaring emergencies to act unconstitutionally on immigration, on education, on healthcare, why would it stop him on voting rights and elections?
Okay.
So I think this tip of the iceberg, where does this bill's impact really go is going to be the real question.
David, as I said in the introduction, this new law has some, I call candy giveaways, and giveaways that will impact our national debt, but yet will satisfy a lot of people and give them direct benefit and maybe blunt criticism of the bill. And one of those giveaways is for seniors of 65 years or older, that the proposal of this bill is for the years 2025, 2026, 2027, that seniors will receive, if they qualify, a $6,000 tax deduction if their income is $75,000 or less, or $12,000 tax deduction if for a married couple that earns $150,000 or less. Now, do you think these same recipients of this benefit will also be impacted adversely by Medicare cuts or Medicaid cuts? Maybe not so much Medicaid, but Medicare.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that, it's a little bit of a bait and switch. And remember, the promise was there aren't going to be any taxes on Social Security.
Correct.
There are taxes on Social Security. And instead, there's this short window of $6,000 for which not everybody qualifies. And he's proclaiming that, look, I fulfilled my promise to take away taxes on Social Security, and he didn't. But that's been the pattern all along, to kind of misrepresent what's going on. Yeah, the impacts are going to be much greater than they are literally at the first level. We were talking a minute ago about Medicaid and the number of individuals that will be hurt by the cuts to Medicaid. And before we started this broadcast, we talked about some of the more outreaching effects and talking about rural hospitals. And when you talk about Medicaid payments don't go to individual recipients. They go to the providers, and they go to, for example, rural hospitals. And if you cut those Medicaid payments, many of those hospitals are not going to be able to survive. So now we're talking about cuts not just hurting people that actually benefit from Medicaid directly. We're talking about hurting people that go to rural hospitals, because you may not have any hospital anywhere near you anymore. So the kind of the expansive effect of some of these decisions is really, we're not really comprehending them yet. But soon we will. When we look at what happened in Congress, it's just on so many levels, it's so discouraging. You've got a group, a freedom group that's describes themselves as aggressive deficit hawks, and they just fold over on a bill that's going to dramatically increase the deficit, which will have all kinds of repercussions for the United States' ability to sell the bonds that we depend on to run our economy these days. There's going to be all kinds of consequences of the raise in this debt. You've got $130 billion going to about $50 billion going down to this border wall construction. Got about $50 billion going to the expansion of detention capacity. Another $30 billion going on to ICE generally. So $130 billion going there when we're cutting Medicaid and we're cutting the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the SNAP program. It's pretty incomprehensible from any kind of objective measure. I just keep wondering, how can people continue to support this? I know some of my close friends are Christians, and they continue to support this administration. And this kind of weird thing is happening where conservative churches are kind of defining American society as angelic and demonic. And the Republicans are angelic, and whatever they're doing is in the service of the right cause, and whatever the progressives or left or Democrats are doing, it's in the service of the demonic cause. And it sounds kind of unbelievable, but people believe it. They actually believe there's a spiritual war going on in this country, and you got to pick your side.
Well, that's what happens when you try to implement a theocracy and a democracy. It's either or. There's no room in between. See, let me tap onto your comments about the rural hospitals. Take you to Senator Murkowski of Alaska. And she went on and on and on in front of the camera saying how this is an awful, terrible bill. And yet she was the one that voted for this thing to pass the Senate. And she got in front of the cameras and explained, well, they did a last minute provision of adding $30 billion per year for 4 years, which is $120 billion, that would shore up rural hospitals in America. And because Alaska had so many rural hospitals, she had to vote yes because it would serve her constituency. You buy that? And will $120 billion over 4 years prop up all the rural hospitals in America?
Well, Jay raised the question of why would you do something like this bill? Because it's all a short-term perspective. We've got a president who's just about to turn 80 years old, not going to be around that much longer. Got to look at it. How long is he going to be here? It's appropriate for me to see the world through a short-term lens. And this promise to have this fund that will fill the gap for rural hospitals temporarily. Yes, that's fine. That's great. Yes, it's gonna solve the problem. It obviously won't. That fund will be depleted relatively quickly, and it's not going to be there in a few years. So the fact that you sit there and you watch individuals who, as you have observed, go on rants about how bad the bill is, and then ultimately turn around and vote for it. It's so disappointing and disturbing that people roll over like that. We've got an administration, got a president who defines himself as a great negotiator, and really his only negotiating strategy is bullying. Threats and bullying. And if you don't go along with me, I'm gonna have these hurtful consequences for you. And that's all there is to that negotiation. And it was, the hope was there that 3 people would step up on the Republican side and vote against this bill, and it would be the end of it. And it didn't happen. And we ended up with a tie. And then we knew what was going to happen when the vice president voted. He would vote for it, and here we are. So we have a terrible bill. People are going to be hurt. All we can do is hope that when 2026 comes along, people can connect the dots and understand that the reason why their lives are worse now than they were a few years ago is because of the policies of the current administration and the current members of Congress, and they need to be replaced.
Jay, this bill basically is transferring, in my opinion, the social safety net from the feds over to the states. A lot of money is going to transfer over. And the question is, will the states pick up that responsibility? I'm thinking of states like Mississippi that are desperately poor, and their state governments reject certain financial incentives for increasing the Obamacare, and they rejected it outright. Although the money was there and available for them, they didn't want a partnership with the Affordable Care Act. Will we have similar situations now that a lot of the safety net is being transferred to the state? I'm also thinking of FEMA, cuts to FEMA, and will certain states pick up the slack and provide services that are equal to or greater than what the feds are offering right now?
No, because even if they wanted to, and I guess in some states there's an ideological question or a political question, even if they wanted to, they couldn't. Here you have the taxes on the country in general essentially remain the same, so that you'd better file your federal income tax by, April 15th, or else if you don't do that, they're going to come for you and they're going to prosecute you and they're going to put you in jail. So you'd better file your tax and pay your tax. Okay. And that goes to Trump's new enlarged federal government. Okay. And then the states who have not provided these services in the past will not have the resources to provide them now. Why would they? They're not getting a share of what is going to the federal government under the big, beautiful bullshit bill. The country is being fiscally reorganized and right in front of our eyes. So the states won't have the money. They won't be able to do, the health care or the emergencies or, the federal research, energy projects. They won't have the money. So here you are paying for the federal government to do stuff, but the federal government's not doing anything, and, quote, your term, transferring it to the states, but the states don't have the money. So P.S., it won't get done. It's incredible. What do? Do you not pay your tax? Bad idea, because he's building a national police force. This is becoming a police state. He's removing a lot of the jurisdiction of the FBI and putting it in the hands of the brown shirts, on which, as we have discussed, he's spending tens of billions to expand unconstitutional kidnapping, trafficking, confinement of people who committed no crime. Most recently, even citizens who have assisted, the targeted immigrants. So what we have here is a new kind of 1930s police force. This is becoming a police state. So if you want to mess with the federal government now, you're going to have to cope with that. So the short answer to your question is a lot of these services that have been provided by the federal government won't be provided by anybody. And as David says, it's gradually we're going to see this ramp up into an effect that will change our lives, our country, the protections that we have relied on from the federal government. It's not only civil liberties, it's everything. Everything the federal government has done for us, I think, will diminish or disappear.
I had to think twice when you said, it's your obligation to pay your taxes. I find it a little ironic because Donald Trump and Doge hollowed out the IRS auditors and collectors. So I guess he's just depending on everyone's good faith that they will pay their taxes.
I suppose, their real power is to target those individuals who get up and publicly state they're not paying their taxes. That's his style. You're right. They don't have the audit force, the audit staffing that they used to have because they've cut back the IRS. But they will do targeted audits against those who have made it public that they are not paying their taxes. Remember, we have Billy Long from, I want to say, Missouri, who is the IRS commissioner now, and he is an instrument of Trump. If Trump tells him to target somebody for not paying taxes, it's clear that he will do that. That's his power, that's his utility, that's his role in the new government.
Righty. We're almost out of time, but before we go around the table for last thoughts, Chuck, and I'll ask this of you as well, David, of all the provisions in the big, beautiful bill, and I said beautiful, I shouldn't have said that, what part do you have the most angst with? The most troublesome part of the bill?
I think the most honest answer to that question, Tim, is it doesn't make any sense to separate out one. The cumulative effect of shifting wealth, shifting resources, healthcare, disaster preparedness and relief, education, housing, transportation, shifting all of that over to a very, very tiny sector of the population, and only a political wing of that sector is going to impact the way that everybody in this country lives for a long time.
As did severe cuts during the Reagan administration. Those changes changed the country in many ways. So great point, Chuck. Appreciate it. David, same question to you. What part of this bill do you have the most trouble with?
Yeah, I think Chuck really described it very appropriately and effectively. That it's the transfer of wealth. I mean, it's a I'm not sure it's unprecedented, but it's certainly a historic transfer of wealth between the haves and the have-nots. And we could go down the list and itemize all the different ways that's happening, but it's happening in a number of different ways. And again, cumulatively, it's pretty staggering in its effect. 1944 and 1945, our marginal tax rates were 94%. For the 1950s until the mid 1960s, our marginal tax rates were 91%. This bill puts our marginal tax rate at about 37%. So, where are you going to make up the money? The Republicans say that, well, there'll be so much more money available to corporations that they'll expand their operations and invest the money, and there'll be more jobs, and everybody will be richer. But in 2017, that didn't really happen. What happened was a lot of that money that was collected by virtue of the lower tax cuts went back to the shareholders as dividends. And it didn't create new jobs, and it didn't create more wealth. So they're kind of singing the same song that, oh, don't worry about it. We won't have these big deficits because, again, it's basically trickle-down theory, and it doesn't happen. It didn't happen in 2017, and it's not going to happen now. And when you go down and look at all these different kinds of cuts in there, they're frightening on so many levels. It's kind of an anti-climate change bill also in terms of a transfer of wealth. It's canceling credits for electric vehicles. and crazy things like taking away the tax credit for insulating your home and getting efficient appliances. Why would you cancel tax credits for doing that? It's kind of a vengeful policy that is very short-term oriented, playing off to kind of his followers, and that kind of destruction of our environmental protections is another thing we haven't really talked about, but very concerning.
I'm glad you mentioned the vengeful aspects of this bill. Anything that the Biden administration or Obama administration that promoted is being ripped out either through executive orders or through this tax bill. So excellent point on that, David. Thank you. Jay, we've run out of time, so your last thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, notice that there's nothing in here to maintain the infrastructure. Joe Biden was really interested in doing that. Trump is not interested in doing that. The second point I would mention that's important to me is that he lied about selling the bill. You know, this goes back to Kellyanne Conway about alternative truth. We've had lies, by the tens of thousands from this man, and we had lies about this bill. That's how you do legislation. Everything about this bill is a lie. But finally, I want to pick up on David's comment about vengeful. It's vengeful because Trump is at war. Whether it's a mental thing or an ideological thing, or whether he's getting it from his advisors, he's at war. It's not only that he's at war with our allies. It's not only that he sort of turned the table with Putin. Now he supports the guy we used to be at war with. He's at war with the country. He's at war with everything. He's at war with the people, with the immigrants, the migrants, even people who are citizens, even people who have committed no crime. He's at war with the law. He's at war with science and green energy. He's at war with the children. He's at war with nutrition and medical care. He's at war with the future. We are not nutrition, economic opportunity. So I think we have to see it in that sense. That's the only thing that works for me. This guy, in his perverted view of the world, in his perverted policies, is at war. And it's people out there, maybe some of the MAGAs out there think, well, these things are bad now, but he changes his mind. Taco, maybe he'll extend the corruption and the payoff aspects of this, the bribery aspects of it, and it'll be okay later. No, it won't, because we know now for sure that he's at war with the country, and it's going to continue. And gentlemen, it's going to get worse.
All right, Jay, thank you. I would add to your list, he's at war with every blue state and their administration. Chuck, your final thoughts.
I think Dave and Jay have summed it up pretty well. I think the question is really going to be whether enough people and whether sufficiently strong, sufficiently charismatic leadership develops to establish a choice, if there is one, in 2026 and in 2028.
David, you get the final word for today.
I saw a video clip of Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, what should we be doing today? And he says one thing: stop whining. He just says, just stop whining. And I think we have to take that to heart. We can't just complain. We really have to think how we can change the circumstances and what can we do to make sure that when 2026 comes, that we can replace the current members of the Congress for people that are going to be more protective of workers. We've got a situation that wealth is being favored over working. Investment income is benefiting from this, and workers are going to continue to lose ground. And that's the vast, vast majority of America. So I think we need to criticize. We need to highlight all the shortcomings of the bill, but also we have to think constructively about what actually are we doing to make sure we can change things in 2026.
Excellent point. We'll see if Elon Musk's new third party will have any impacts that detract voters away from the GOP. One never knows how a third party will manifest itself when it comes time for an election. But your point is well taken, David. Thank you. That's it for today. I'd like to thank our esteemed guests, Chuck Crumpton, David Larson. I would like to thank Jay Fidel. This is American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and join us next week. And until then, aloha.